Good morning, afternoon.
Evening, all
Yes,
the time. Yes,
we'll cover the whole spectrum right up front. How's it going,
absolutely.
man?
I am doing great, but I'll do better. How are you?
I'm great. Nice to meet you, man. Where are you located?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Omaha. Yeah, we're in the Midwest. I'm in Kansas City,
Oh, very nice. Kansas City, Kansas, or Missouri?
Missouri.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I know they're not that far from each other and they share a name, but they're still different, as I
they're
understand.
they are, and it's confusing because when you get somebody that hasn't been here or on the coast, it's always Kansas. It's
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
beautiful.
but yeah, man. Hey, it's great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out, and I want to begin our conversation with living through the last 3.5 years, getting through a pandemic. How did you get through it, and how has it changed you?
Well, first and foremost, I got through it, I would say relatively well. I mean, considering the kind of BS that a lot of my friends and colleagues and family members had to endure, I was somewhat fortunate because, for instance, I work for myself and my business is now it's 100% online, but I moved it 100% online in 2019. I was living in Pennsylvania and then I moved back to Omaha, which is where I grew up.
Yeah.
And I thought about getting a job at a gym because my business is a fitness business and it's very self-aggrandizing in that it's all products that I've created and it's my services and things like that. So it's all basically centered around my approach to fitness and strength and health. But I like training people face to face, and I thought about maybe getting a job part time, just at a gym, just because I like that component of my business. But I'd already had a bunch of seminars and workshops and other events set up in a variety of different countries for 2020. And I thought, well, look, you know what? If I get a job, working for the man at a gym, they're going to expect me to find someone to cover my shift or train my clients and all this other stuff. And I just didn't want somebody breathing down my neck. So I said, okay, I'll just make everything online and I'll make that adjustment. And turns out to have been a fortuitous decision because when 2020 hit, they were shutting down gyms and health clubs, not liquor stores and fast food restaurants for whatever reason, but certainly healthy options were off the table for many.
Yeah.
And most of uh, my travel workshops and seminars ended up having to be postponed indefinitely. But the only one that I was able to do was Australia. So I was there for a couple of workshops in February, and I got out at a good time because I think it was like March or April they turned it back into a prison colony.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was I mean, it was tough in the sense that it was tough for everybody else in that it was like there were so many restrictions and things we could not do, so many just like nothing was normal. I don't need to explain it to you. You were there, you experienced it. But I would say I was fortunate in that other elements of my life, like my business and things like that, were set up in such a way that they weren't negatively impacted the way that a lot of other people's were.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do today for a business and what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade kids. It's career day, and one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that kid?
I help people get stronger, fitter, and healthier and happier through kettlebells, calisthenics, and natural human movement.
What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
A paleontologist.
Okay, cool. How did that dream get birthed?
I loved the movie. Well, first of all, I loved dinosaurs growing
Yeah.
up. I was like the biggest nerd for dinosaurs, and I remember actually somebody told me I heard this secondhand, but I had a music teacher named Miss Mullen, and I was just known in all my classes for being like this, big dino geek and stuff like that. And this was the early '90s. Jurassic Park had just come out, which of course instantly became my favorite movie, even though I missed half of it because, as my dad told me, I was hiding in my seat at the movie theater because of all the scary dinosaur stuff. But I remember one of my teachers said, apparently said to one of her classes, somebody had asked her for some reason, the music teacher, how do the dinosaurs die out? And she said, you know what? Nobody really knows, but if anybody does, it's probably Aleks Salkin because he knows everything about dinosaurs.
That's cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So you said you're originally from Omaha. Talk to me a little bit about how fitness became a passion, how being an entrepreneur was the path that you ultimately chose. How did all of these seeds grow into who you are today?
Yeah, if you knew me, let's say 14 or 15 years ago, you would not have expected at all that I would end up in the fitness profession. I didn't expect it at all because going through college, my trajectory was I wanted to become a linguist because I really like foreign languages
Yeah.
and I find it very fascinating. And so my degree is in English with focus on writing and linguistics. So initially, I hadn't really thought it out all that much. I was just kind of focused on getting my bachelor's degree. But my thought was that I was going to get my bachelor's degree in English, and then I was going to go get a master's in linguistics. And then once I finished that, I was going to think about the next phase. But by the time I got my bachelor's in English, I was like, I just don't really want to do this anymore. I now I had a chance to look clearly at what the next step was going to be, and it was basically, I didn't want to write articles that no one will read for journals that no one reads, on the topic of linguistics. It just seemed like it was a waste of my energy. And really, I had to think about, okay, so what do I like? It's like I like learning foreign languages. I already knew a foreign language very well at that point. It's like, and that was before I even got the bachelor's degree. So it's like, so why continue if if I don't need it for this passion of mine? And so there was kind of this gap where I didn't really know what to do. But by this time I'd already gotten certified as a kettlebell instructor under Pavel, who is he's like the George Washington, let's say, of kettlebell training. He's a former Spetsnaz or Soviet Special Forces physical training instructor who came to the US in the late 90s and eventually started teaching about kettlebells and some of the sports science that was largely obscured behind the Iron Curtain, and started exposing Americans to it, who were mostly exposed to sort of a bloated and overblown approach to fitness from like the muscle magazines and supplement companies. I like to think about it as like the difference between hair metal and rock and roll, and then Nirvana came along and they're like, they brought grunge on the scene, and of course that just changed everything. And Pavel was very much like Kurt Cobain without the offing himself element,
Yeah.
I guess you might say.
Yeah.
But in that, it was like a shockwave sent through the industry. And so I got certified under him in 2000. It was 13 years ago, as of last month, as a matter of fact. And it was the hardest physical exertion I've ever gone through, because they really force you to earn it. And it's not like just with beat downs, like we're just going to torture you, but rather like you need to be able to demonstrate that you can demonstrate good technique, you can teach good technique, and that you've already attained a certain level of physical preparedness for this certification. It was like a 3-day course. And again, it was a real trial by fire. And I did it as a personal goal for myself because I grew up kind of scrawny, unathletic, weak, and goofy. And my hope was that by learning the kettlebell kung fu, I would be able to, overcome all of that. And sure enough, I did. So 2 years after I got started lifting kettlebells, I decided to put myself to that ultimate test and get certified as an instructor. But I really didn't have any intention of becoming like a fitness professional. It was really more of like a personal goal.
Yeah.
And it was maybe within a few months, I started getting requests from like friends who wanted to learn about the kettlebell because they were starting to hear more about it. And then I had a profile on a website at the time, the biggest website in the world at the time for kettlebell training and instruction. And somebody who lived in Omaha, which is where I was living back then, reached out and asked if I offered private lessons. And I was like, sure, why not? I had never really considered it up to that point, but I found that I really liked teaching her, and it felt like it had like a level of meaning that was a lot deeper than what my previous path in life seemed like it was going to be. And so I started teaching more people. I ended up leaving the job that I had at the time, ultimately to take this kind of leap of faith when I did a corporate fitness program at a local TV station, and just never looked back. And from there, I found that my purpose, my mission and purpose in life has become to try to help the people who are eager to get fit or ambitious with their goals for themselves, but are hopelessly confused and frustrated by the conflicting opinions and contradictory advice that they see in the fitness industry. I want to help them by guiding them down a path of tried and true methodologies and principles and practices that produce results no matter what. and allow the tactics and the nuances and the little details to kind of show themselves when they're necessary, but not to get bogged down by them. And so um, that has been my raison d'etre ever since I officially took my first client and made it my mission in life to guide these people to the Swoley land, let's say, to get better gains, better fitness, better strength, and more physical confidence in themselves.
So who's been a hero for you in your life? Who's been like an ultimate inspiration?
You know, I would say that we might look at like two different classes of heroes, and I would say first and foremost my parents for sure, because I wouldn't have turned out the way that I did if it weren't for them. And I got to give them the ultimate credit, because anything that came after is sort of like a luxury, meaning the ability to have somebody else that I can look up to and follow on a career path is something that I could not have done if I didn't have a good upbringing, I think. So first and foremost, I would definitely say my parents. I would say that on a professional level, certainly Pavel Tsatsouline, the kettlebell maestro of the world. And then there are others along the way, like I would say Tim Anderson and Jeff Newport have been super big heroes of mine, because Jeff was a master instructor under Pavel. He's since retired, but he still writes about training and fitness. And he and Tim Anderson teamed up and put together an organization that teaches about natural human movement through what's called the human developmental sequence. So, like, if you have kids, or if you've ever seen kids, go from like little babies to toddlers, they go through a series of movements that help to lay the foundation of all the future, more complex movements they're going to do. So they'll start with stuff like just deep breathing, just breathing, moving their head around. Ultimately, they start to kind of roll around on the floor, and they rock back and forth once they can get up on all fours. And then they start crawling, and then they start standing. So all of these movements help to lay this foundation in much the same way that you lay a foundation for a house. And if the foundation of a house starts to kind of crumble or get weak, any cosmetic changes that you make to the house, either inside or outside, are going to be really just that, just purely cosmetic, because the health of the house is going to depend on how strong that foundation is. And so the stronger and more stable that foundation is, the same thing goes with people. Our movement foundation allows us to build as far as we possibly can. We think about what are the real versus perceived limits of human physical achievement. If you want to start moving in that direction, even if you don't want to try to find the actual physical limit, you need to have a good, strong foundation. Like, you would not add a floor to a house with a really shaky and weak basement, let's say. That needs to be taken care of very, very well. And so Tim and Jeff put together Original Strength, which is an organization that I'm also certified through. And I would say without those two things, I wouldn't be where I am today, because I wouldn't have the tools necessary to be able to help people in the way that I'm uniquely suited to be able to do, which is kettlebells, body weight training, and then, of course, the natural human movement element. So those would be the big ones if I had to give kind of a short answer. And then I'll add one more, Arnold Schwarzenegger, because anybody who's ever lifted a weight or, flexed in the mirror has probably largely done it thanks to the influence that he's had.
So you may have just answered my next question. If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Definitely Arnold. I
Yeah.
think he's, even now, it's like I'm just amazed how he's. I read his book like a month ago, the first book that he ever wrote, The Education of a Bodybuilder. And it was really incredible just to see his evolution. I mean, he went from having parents who were very unsupportive of his weird bodybuilding obsession. It was not really well understood back in the days. And there's a funny anecdote in there. He talks about how he had these pictures of like these buff dudes all over his wall, and his mom thought he was gay. And so she went to like the doctor, and the doctor was like, no, this is pretty common. Kids his age want to emulate, heroic type of figures. So he's not gay. He's just normal kid who likes, who just wants to get, buff.
Yeah.
And but nobody really understood it. And this was like in the 60s. People thought that was completely crazy. So he went to from becoming the biggest bodybuilder in the world to becoming a millionaire in real estate and other business related endeavors, to becoming the biggest action star in the world with an unpronounceable last name and a really thick accent, to becoming the governor of the biggest economy in the United States, for a state he couldn't even pronounce.
Yeah.
like, and now, he's gone on to really try to live up to what he talks about a lot in terms of his secrets of success, and that's giving something back. So now he's trying to help people get fitter. He's spending a lot of time focusing on charity and community action to make life better for people. So yeah, I would definitely say Arnold. I think
Yeah.
he's I there are very few people I can say I would truly be starstruck to meet, but he's definitely one of them.
So every day you wake up, what is your motivation? What is it that gets you out of bed, that gets you to accomplish what you want to get done and to help people?
Okay, well, I got to start off by saying, sometimes I'm not motivated. And I wake up and I think I really just don't want to. I'd rather just take the day off. But then I know that's going to make me feel worse because over the long run, again, I have a mission is that I want to lead people who are very much like me and who are now dealing with an even bigger sea of weeds and vines and seemingly, like impassable trails and things like that to get to where their ultimate goal is, where they can feel strong, fit, healthy, and then self-confident. That's the big one is I like to help people, and I like to be able to show people that they're capable with what they have now, meaning their own body weight, maybe a minimal number of tools, small amount of time. That's really all they need to get started. There is a possibility, a very real probability that later on down the road they'll need to invest in some more, but there's no reason for them not to take action now. And so I think when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that I think of is like I want people to, number one, be able to get to where they're going, wherever their heart desires, and I want to be the guy who can help them to do that because I feel uniquely suited to being able to do that, given that it took me many, many years to figure it out on my own, trying to patch together the various different sources and insights from experts that really mostly appealed to other experts or trainers or teachers or whatever it may be. I want to bring that, to use like a Greek mythology term, like be like Prometheus and bring that, fire down from these gods, as it were, to the people who really need it, with the caveat being that unlike Prometheus, I don't want to crash and die. I think something bad happened to him. I don't
Yeah.
remember it. Yeah, I don't think it ended well for him. I
No.
wanted to end well for me. I want this to be like the Hollywood rewrite where there's a happy ending.
Yeah.
But in essence, that's what I want to do is take this great information from sources that mostly appeal to trainers like me, distill it into something that people who are busy professionals and entrepreneurs and just busy folks in general will be able to understand, apply, and profit from.
So what's been your best success story?
Ah, okay. Well, there are a couple of them. I would say the biggest one in terms of the impact that it had on a client's life came from a gal named Sue, not a boy named Sue, for those
Yeah.
of you who are familiar with Johnny Cash, but a gal named Sue, who I trained many, many moons ago. She has since joined the choir Invisible. Unfortunately, she was 80 years old when she passed on, but I started training her when she was 75. She was a candidate for a double knee replacement surgery. She was overweight. She hated exercise with a passion, and she never ceased to remind me every time we trained. She had a very good sense of humor, so she would say something like, "Have I told you lately how much I hate this?" And I would say, "Yes, Sue," every single time. And she said, "Then have I told you lately how much I hate you?" And I would say, "Yeah, yeah, that you certainly have." But we always had a great time together. And even though she didn't really enjoy the stuff that we did because that was just not her nature, she liked to, kick back, relax. She didn't like real physical exertion. Um, she started seeing some really great results. And, she went from really not being able to walk down the street without pretty severe knee pain. And this was something that really scared her because she knew from her experience talking with friends who'd had knees replaced that at her age and with her physical abilities, it would either be a life changer and she would be able to live without pain for the rest of her life, or she would be wheelchair bound. And the thought of the second was a very unpleasant thought to her. So she diligently did what I said, and within 7 months, she was training 5 days a week. Not even doing anything crazy. It was stuff like I talked about with the original strength earlier. It was like crawling on the ground, rocking back and forth, rolling. I had her getting up and down off of progressively lower chairs, just standing up without help from her hands, getting up and down off the floor, things like that. Uh, Within that 7 month period, she went from not being able to walk across the street without serious knee pain to being able to walk, to go on vacation in Spain and walk 10,000 steps a day for 8 days in a row with zero knee pain. That I think might be the biggest accomplishment I've ever had, in the sense that if I think about being able to help people and get them to live a normal life, the closer you get to the edge of being completely incapacitated, or going from barely physically capable to handicap, is it's a great feeling knowing that you were able to help move somebody closer to the middle.
Yeah.
She never became like some track star running and sprinting and stuff like that, but she was able to live a normal life,
Yeah.
for the remainder of the years that she had left. And I have had other success stories, like helping. I helped a lady. I talked about the corporate fitness gig that I did. That came about because I was training a gal whose nickname was Charlie. She had never done strength training in her life. She was like 50 years old, and within a couple of months of working toward this goal, I was able to get her to do her first chin up of her life, full, hanging, no bent elbows, but just completely hanging at the bottom, to pulling her chin over the bar. And again, beginning at age 50.
Yeah.
And I would say those are some really big goals, because a lot of people look at where they're starting from and they think, there's just no way I can get there.
Yeah.
And what I think I was able to do is show them, all you have to do is take the next step, and then tomorrow do the same thing, and we'll
Yeah.
just see where it takes us.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are huge. I'm very, very proud of those accomplishments.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into a much younger version of yourself, say at 20, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point. What would you say to your younger version?
I would say be more courageous, and uh, be willing to make seemingly big leaps of faith earlier on. I think one of the things that would have helped me would have been, for instance, to start the online portion of my business a few years sooner. Because technically, I did start it like in 2014, but it wasn't until 2016 that I actually started to do something with it. And so I kind of got like a 2 year late start, because I don't know, I was a little uncomfortable with the idea of making this leap in my training. And I really think that for me, for instance, if I'm going to be a good example to the people who expect me to lead them, that means that I also have to have the ability to, number one, seek help when I want to accomplish something. So whether it's with in business, in foreign language learning, like I've hired tutors online and stuff like that to kind of help my process along, and not being afraid to ask for that help and that guidance, because that's the sort of a thing that's going to help you to really just shorten the path. A lot of people have this idea that they're a little bit afraid of working with a professional, and maybe because they're just not sure what to expect, maybe because they fear that it's going to expose that they have weaknesses that they need to work on. But if I'm not willing to do that for myself, I can't as easily expect my students to want to do the same thing, or my prospective students to want to do the same thing. So that's what I would say would be to seek help earlier and be correct in doing so, because if you don't, you're really setting yourself up for kind of a stalemate for maybe years at a time, when really you could get started much more quickly and be off to the races before you know it.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's
Mhm.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It's a really good question. I think that I'm somebody who is very fascinated and driven by the idea of not just being but becoming. And it reminds me, I mentioned Johnny Cash a little bit earlier. One of my favorite songs that he ever did was actually, it was a U2 song that he sang on, and it was called The Wanderer.
Yeah.
And there's this line in there. You've heard this song,
Oh,
I
yeah.
take it. One of my favorite of all time, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Um, there's a great line in there, and he said, "I want to taste and touch and feel as much as a man can before he repents." Which I take it to mean, like, before he breathes his last breath, and makes right with God for whatever he owes on his bill of trying to develop his life. And in particular, I can't really say what Johnny intended by it, but what I take from that is that, have experiences that grow you as a person and help you to become what you could be, as opposed to just taking the easy route, letting other people make decisions for you. You have to be able to act boldly. And I think that my perception of myself is somebody who is perpetually in the process of doing that, even if I haven't arrived. I'm not so sure there's really an arrival point.
Yeah.
I think you get to these new heights, and some people just want to cruise and coast, but the essence of life is entropy, or kind of deterioration, if you're not actively working on moving on to the next thing. And so I think that's how I would perceive myself, as somebody who's constantly trying to develop himself, and partially for my own good, because it's something that really fascinates me, and then also partially because I want to be able to be a good influence on others and get others to say, why not me?
Yeah.
Even if I never work with them, one-on-one, even if I never speak to them, if they follow me, they see what I do, they see where I've come from and what I've been able to accomplish. I want them to be able to say, why not me? And maybe just take that first step. And wherever it takes them, as long as I got them to take the first step, I know that it will have been worth it.
Speaking of the first step, if anyone out there wants to hire you, learn more about you, reach out, what's the best way to do that?
I would say the best first step would be to get my free 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge, because it's really the essence of everything that I do, kind of like distilled down into one ebook. And it's free. If you go to 9minutechallenge.com, you can download it. And I've also made it like a no fear kettlebell and bodyweight course, in a manner of speaking, because it's based around the most natural of all human movements and the least trained of all human movements, which is the gait pattern, or your walking pattern, via movements like crawling, which is just done just with your body weight. And it's exactly what it sounds like, just crawling on the ground, but it recruits a ton of muscle, really improves your ability to turn your body into one solid unit that is all working toward one specific thing. So it's not the same thing as, bicep curls and then leg extensions and then shoulders. Like, you're not breaking yourself up into a collection of barely connected parts. You're learning how to move your entire body as one unit. And similarly, on the kettlebell side of things, just being able to pick up and carry a kettlebell or a couple of kettlebells works wonders for helping you to tie your body together, get a lot stronger. And these moves take maybe 30 seconds to learn. Very low risk, in terms of exercise selection. There are other excellent moves in the kettlebell and bodyweight world that certainly have a higher risk, but it gets mitigated when you've spent more time building up your base and kind of, getting in a good foundation. So the 9-minute challenge is based around these movements that we all really should be training, but most of us just kind of don't. And it can be done with any other fitness regimen. So you don't have to abandon your current path and kind of take a gamble on this new one. You can do it either at the beginning of your workouts, at the end as a finisher. You can do it on in between days when you're not normally working out. And again, it'll give you a good idea of kind of how I do things overall. And if you think, wow, this guy's a genius, in addition to being handsome and well-spoken, then you'll be able to enter my world and see what other offers that I have. And if you're like, wow, this guy's a real blankety blank, and I'm not so sure I follow his mindset. Well, you're not out any money. It was a free thing for you to test it out, and you can be on your merry way. But again, even if that helps you take a step in a better direction for you, it will have all been worth it. So 9minutechallenge.com, and you can get hooked up with that free report.
I love it. Aleks, thank you so much for your time, man. Thanks for your passion. I appreciate your story.
Thank you for having me on. It was a blast.
Yes, sir. Take care.